The soundtrack to my life. Part 2. Chapter 2. We'll call it Chapter 2. Where did it start? Well, it all started in front of a piano in a gymnasium. You betcha. There was a young lady playing the piano, and she was playing Watermark by Enya. Well, she was pretty beautiful, and I kind of knew her, and I hadn't seen her in years. And she had grown up because I was about 17, and I probably met her when I was probably 14. And, well, she blossomed into the most beautiful woman. Because at that age, she would have been 19, and I would have been about 17, 18, somewhere in there. Anyway, she was playing Enya, Watermark. And I remember after I was done listening to her, I looked at her and I said, I love Enya. And I give her a kiss on the cheek. Pretty bold move for a young guy like me. Anyway, she eventually moved to the city I was living in. Probably a year later. She didn't look me up right away. I mean, she was going to college, and I was working. I kind of skipped out on the college thing. My mom was throwing lots of money at my brother and throwing lots of money at my sister, and, they both wound up going to college. I wound up in the Beaufort Sea. I wound up working and traveling in the oil fields and making huge cash. So I've been rich and I've been broke, and I don't know which one I prefer. I don't know. Anyway, my story continues on in the front seat of a Jeep Comanche. That's like a little truck Jeep. It was an Eliminator 1990, and this young lady's name was Sarah. Sarah. She sang in the church choir. She was very religious. Her mother was her whole family was very religious. Her sister went on to be a recording artist, and maybe Sarah would have too. Anyway, I remember playing Ship of Fools for her once by Robert Plant. And she looked at me, she goes, this is Robert Plant. And I said, yeah. She goes, like the Led Zeppelin guy? And I said, yeah, the Led Zeppelin guy. She says, whatever you do, please don't play me If I Were a Carpenter. And I was like, why would I play that? And she says, so many guys try and pick me up because I go to church, and, the song's all about, Jesus being a carpenter, and if I were a carpenter and you were a lady. I can't remember the lyrics. Well, I remember the lyrics. I just, it's not a song. It's actually a song I actually kind of avoid, to be honest with you, because it's, part of the soundtrack of my life. And anyway, we listened to 9 Inch Nails. She wasn't a fan. We listened to Tool. She wasn't a fan. We listened to old rock and roll songs, like Led Zeppelin, She liked the Beatles. She loved Enya. She just loved Enya because she was such a great piano player. Pianist, I guess you'd call that. I'm not into the church choir, never was. Never really a church guy, to be quite honest with you. Tried it, I'm not gonna lie. Tried it, wasn't my thing. Anyway, this whole story really takes place in the front seat of a Jeep, because that's where my stereo was at the time. And, over a period of time, hanging out, chilling, she wanted to learn how to drive that Jeep. Well, I'll tell you right now, there was no soundtrack involved in that. We'd have to turn the stereo down, and I finally just looked at her and I said, listen. I said, if you just let the clutch out real slow, this is a fuel-injected vehicle, it will start going all by itself. Don't worry about the damn gas. Whoever's tried to teach you this in the past is just wrong. Once it starts to move, unless you're on a hill, then give it some gas. Well, I had her driving within, 20 minutes, half an hour. And you know what? We'd go out for rips and drives and listen to music, and She eventually started liking Tool. She liked country music. I don't know. Wasn't my thing. But whatever. She eventually started liking Tool, and she eventually started liking Metallica. I mean, who doesn't like Metallica? And, that's where I was at those moments in time in my life. Ozzy Osbourne, she wasn't a huge fan, but, you know, she was just more of a soft music kind of a person, you know. And Enya is my only real example that I can give you to that soundtrack of my life. And that's probably the reason why I own everything that Enya has ever recorded, is because of Sarah. And anyway, this is where the story gets a little bit sad, I guess you could say. Well, you couldn't say, well, you have to say kind of, because it's the truth. She went home for, I believe it was in September. She went home maybe for Thanksgiving or something like that. Anyway, she went home, and she was visiting her parents. And her parents lived about 2 hours away from me, and they lived on a logging road, like a road heavily used by loggers. And she took a look, and her brother had bought a brand new Jeep. It wasn't the same kind of Jeep as mine, but it was a Jeep nonetheless. But if you sat in it, you wouldn't know the difference other than the fact that mine was a pickup truck and his was a Cherokee. So if you know those vehicles, you know where I'm going. They look pretty much the same. And of course it had a 5-speed in it, just like mine did. And she says, "Oh my God, you gotta let me try your Jeep. I've been hanging out with this guy, and he's been teaching me how to drive and stuff like that. And we talk, and we smoke cigarettes, and we listen to music and stuff." And her mother kind of chirped in, and she's like, "Who's this guy?" And well, she explained, and we already knew each other. I knew her mother, I knew her father, I knew everybody. I knew her brother. My brother was one of his best friends. Anyway, she took the Jeep. She took the Jeep out for a drive, and I think it was about 20 to, I don't know, half an hour later, there was a knock at the door, and it was the RCMP, which is Canada's police. And there had been a major collision on the Logan Road, and to cut right to the chase, Sarah was gone. She was gone. The sun was in her eyes, they think. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt, they know. And yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. I hadn't seen her in a long time. Like in a long time when you're a kid is like 2 months. She was pretty busy at college, and I think she was kind of seeing a guy. I think that's probably why I wasn't seeing her as much as I used to. And that's fine, because we were just friends. But and there was moments that maybe we weren't just friends, but we were young, so it didn't matter. But if I go back in history and I look at it, I have always listened to Enya. I even left an Enya CD on her gravestone one time. It was Shepherd's Moon CD. And it had just come out, and she would never have been alive to have heard it. I'd have to look that up and see when it came out. Anyway, I left it on there, and then I ran into her parents at a local restaurant in my city. They were visiting, and it was about 4 or 5 years after. It took a long time to go to her gravesite, because I did go to her funeral, but I couldn't watch her being put in the ground. I just couldn't do it. Just wasn't me. Just couldn't do it. And my mom had come because she knew the family. And I was just like, I can't do this shit. So anyway, I left that CD there, and her mom looked up at me and she says, "We got your CD. And what a beautiful note you wrote inside it." And I was like, you got my CD. She goes, well, you left a CD on the gravestone. And I said, well, that's funny. I said, I never signed it. Her mom gave me that mother look. She goes, yeah, but you left it. And I was like, yeah, I actually did. She goes, anyway, it's very beautiful. It's very nice to see you, young man. Anyway, music can be sad. And sometimes I just hate memories.